So here's a list of items in the operating budget. This is not deferred maintenance or capital yet, but in the operating budget that we are proposing to fund. Again, $137,000 revenue offset on the youth program financial assistance, ongoing funding for the senior bistro program, which we just started back up through a grant at $50,000 a year moving forward, adding a third dash vehicle via a vehicle lease to increase the service there based on demand. We are proposing adding 2 positions. The first is an additional associate engineer to help support our capital projects and get all the capital projects and deferred maintenance projects that we're proposing moving forward, and really kind of getting on the fast track there, as well as an additional park maintenance worker to make sure that all our buildings and grounds are in tip-top shape. We are also proposing $50,000 in additional arts and culture funding. This is our toe in the water on implementing arts and culture master plan to be dedicating some funds to programming actions in that plan. And then some new park maintenance equipment, including the items you see here in bullet point below. They're spread over both 2 years. Some of them are replacements, some of them are new equipment that's needed to take care of city parks facilities. I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm going to keep rolling.
One quick question. How did city staff determine the $50,000 annually for the arts and culture funding? Like, what was the determination on that number? And is it like seed funding, or is it? I think I saw it in the other schedule, but just curious to see how you folks came up on that number.
I think that's, and Director Thea may want to jump in with some thoughts. I think seed funding is a really good way to put it. There's a lot in the public art master plan that you all adopted last summer. You're not going to get it done with this amount annually. I'll say that out loud. But we also see some work is necessary to figure out what that implementation looks like and what those steps are. So in advance of some of that happening, we wanted to make sure we had something set aside to support those efforts and help us determine what the bigger picture needs look like going forward. So, honestly, it's a round number, and it's a number that we think is sustainable in the fund right now and allows us to do something really meaningful. But it's a program cost that I think the council should expect to have conversations about for several years to come as we try to figure out what the long-term right number is.
Thank you, City Manager. Any questions from council on this slide? Vice Mayor Kelly?
I just wanted to ask, I know in some of the call outs for the implementation of the Arts and Culture Master Plan, it talks about kind of cultural events and, expansion of some of the things that community services has already been doing historically. And so I'm curious, in addition to the more kind of governmental implementation pieces, but I'm wondering, is that reflected in some of the increases in operating expenses for expanding those cultural events or doing pieces of the arts and culture funding that would be just expanding the existing work that community services has been doing historically?
It is budgeted as additional expenditure authority within the arts and culture budget line item of the community services budget. I'm not sure if
I see Mark popped in too. He might have some to add to that.
Good evening, Council. The $50,000 proposed in this is new funding that would be allocated towards implementing the actual Arts and Culture Master Plan. Some of the increases that are reflected in our operating budget request are things like the Mary Healdsburg event, which is a new event that wasn't budgeted the past year, so that comes into play into this. We're restructuring our budget framework a little bit also to move those special events into a special event program area, and then we'll have a focused arts and culture program area within the budget to better track those dollars moving forward as well. So to answer your question, Councilor Kelly, most of the $50,000 is all about doing implementation of the Arts and Culture Master Plan, and the special events and the growth of special events reflects the growth of those special events in the past, and it captures those in the budget.
And those events are reflected where in the budget that we're looking at?
They're in the operating budget. They are reflected. I'll go back to just one second.
No worries. I guess while you're looking, I'll just well, the reason why I'm asking is I think there's been questions from the community basically saying, you know, arts and culture is so important, and we've been putting all this energy in and doing the arts and culture master plan, but why is the city only allocating 50,000 to the arts? And it's my understanding that we actually are allocating more in other programmatic areas, and I'm just trying to get a sense of where those exist.
I don't necessarily know that. Well, I mean, all the things a lot of the activities we do are related to arts and culture, whether it's supporting the arts fair or Art After Dark or Dia de los Muertos. Those all have an aspect of arts and culture. So they are reflected in our operating budget in a number of different areas. Staffing, for example, operational expenses, all of the costs related to the Tuesday concerts ends up in operational expenses. So they're all interwoven within there. The $50,000 is really to move the arts and culture master plan forward.
And do you already know what those implementation strategies are that are included in that?
No. Well, let me back up. Yes, the arts and culture master plan has a list of different implementation strategies and approaches. The cost to implement those was significantly more than what's currently represented in the budget. So we'll sit down with the creative leadership team, if city council approves this, look at the $50,000 and work with the community, city council, Parks and Recreation Commission, to determine which of those priorities in the arts and culture master plan can be funded with that $50,000. Is it grants to nonprofits? Is it gifts? Is it grants to local artists? I'm not sure yet. We haven't had that conversation because we'll need to know what amount of funding is allocated first.
Director Themick, I just wanted to echo some of Vice Mayor Kelly's comments. You know, I think there's, you know, this community effort of the, you know, the arts and culture master planning process that was, you know, affected by the pandemic. And, you know, there was so much work that went into it. And obviously I know that, you know, not every strategy, right, can be that we want to implement can actually get funding. But I would be, you know, curious to see if, you know, I raised a question before, like, how did we get to this number? And I would be open to perhaps increasing this number. And so that's my thoughts on this specific item. So I just wanted to comment on that. Councilmember Higley.